Welcome back, Capital F football fans, to the O&O Sports YouTube channel. I'm going to start off this episode by saying thank you for your support on this channel. We are almost at 100 subscribers. Let's try to get there before the next upload. Your support is what keeps us going, so thank you for that. And if you want to participate directly in the uploads you see on this channel, be sure to go to the community tab on this channel and vote on the next team you want to see get a season preview. We are winding down the season previews, only a couple more left before we get into conference predictions, so be sure to make it count. For this episode, you voted on a very special Group of 5 exclusive poll, and today we are taking a look at the Memphis Tigers. To start off with the Memphis Tigers, let's go over a 2023 recap. What went wrong for Memphis last season? And it's a short list. It's going to be just defense. The defense was not very good last year, but it didn't need to be. They outscored their opponents most of the time, en route to winning 10 games, but the defense was in fact not very good. We're going to read you a few stats that we think encompass that. They were 96th in opponent points per game, 88th in opponent points per play, 61st in opponent red zone scoring percentage, 87th in opponent rushing yards per game, 96th in opponent rushing yards per attempt, 130th in opponent pass yards per game, over 280 passing yards per game. Absolutely unacceptable. 122nd in opponent pass yards per completion, and 102nd in the sacks per game. All of that to say, their defensive coordinator, Matt Barnes, was out as defensive coordinator after the season last year. He is replaced by Jordan Hankins this year. And that is what went wrong. What about what went right? Well, we talked about it a little bit just a second ago. The scoring was amazing for Memphis last year. They were 7th in points per game, which was 2nd in the Group of 5. 10th in points per play nationally, 2nd in the Group of 5. 39th in red zone scoring percentage, 11th in the Group of 5. 9th in first half points per game, 2nd Group of 5, and 6th in second half points per game, which was also 2nd in the Group of 5. And surprisingly, they were an even better second half team than they were a first half team. Not by pure numbers, but in terms of national ranking, they were a higher second half scoring team than a first half scoring team. And that was absolutely crucial for them last year. And likewise, the pass offense was also very good last season. Seth Henigan, the quarterback for Memphis, was outstanding. He threw for a 67% completion percentage, which was 20th in the country, 9th in the Group of 5. He threw for over 3,800 yards, which was 4th only behind Michael Penix Jr., Bo Nix, and Carson Beck. 2 of those were Heisman finalists last year. That was 1st in the Group of 5. He threw for 32 touchdowns also, which was tied for 6th in the country and tied for 3rd in the Group of 5. And that was due in no small part to the pass protection. The offensive line was very solid last year. They ranked 33rd nationally in sacks allowed per game and 18th nationally in sack allowed percentage. They threw the ball a lot last year, and Henigan did not get pressured a lot in the process. Exactly what you want to see from a pass offense. And likewise, the rush offense was very good. They were 107th in rushing play percentage. Under 50% of the time they rushed the ball. That doesn't sound that good, but considering they ran the ball under 50% of the time, they were 72nd in rush yards per game and 40th in rush yards per attempt. So they were very effective, although those numbers don't look very good. If you bump that rushing play percentage up to about 55-60%, they're probably a top 30 rushing offense. And last on what went right, they were a very, very disciplined team last year. They were 17th in giveaways per game, 18th in turnover margin. They were tied for 8th in penalties per game and 8th in penalties per play. So they didn't turn the ball over very many times last year, and they were a very good penalty team. All around very disciplined team. Although the defense did have its woes, they saw a lot of success in 2023 just due to how great that offense was alone. And that was 2023. Let's take a look at 2024. The schedule for Memphis starts off at home versus Northern Alabama, then at home versus Troy, On the road to Florida State, at Navy, at home versus Middle Tennessee State, then a bye week. On the road in Tampa to face USF, at home versus North Texas, and then at home versus Charlotte. On the road versus UTSA, at home versus Rice, at home versus UAB, another bye week. And then to end the season, they are on the road versus Tulane. For an AAC schedule, this is pretty tough. Obviously, the AAC schedule isn't going to be as tough as the Power 4 schedules, but for what it's worth, it's not easy. Tulane, USF, and UTSA all on the road is brutal for conference play. Obviously, Florida State is their toughest opponent in their non-conference. And then they also have a pretty difficult matchup facing Troy at home early on in the season. But Troy is in a bit of a rebuild, so not necessarily as tough of a matchup as if they played last year. That was the schedule. Let's get into some strengths for Memphis this season, and there's a lot of them. We're going to start off with the offense as a whole. Seth Hennigan, probably their biggest strength. Retaining him was huge this year. He could have transferred, probably been a Power 4 starter, but he stays, and he will easily be one of, if not the best, Group of 5 quarterback. But he does have good competition this year in guys like Caden Salter at Liberty, Joey Aguilar at App State, and Malachi Nelson, who transfers to Boise State this year. Very good Group of 5 quarterbacks, and he's going to be right there in the mix for the best of the bunch. And other than Hennigan, the wide receiver room is also loaded again this year. They return their top 2 wide receivers in Rock Taylor and Demir Blankenship. Those two combined for over 1,900 yards and 11 touchdowns. They also add sophomore Jacoby Banks from Houston, and he actually enters the team as the highest rated wide receiver on the roster, according to 24/7. He is going to be potentially dangerous target in the slot for Hennigan. He seems like a very dynamic weapon. Interesting to see how he will be utilized. Potentially a game changer if he can get everything going. And they also add Jair Shorter, who was at Auburn last year, didn't see the field much, but just 2 years ago, he was one of the best wide receivers, if not the best wide receiver at North Texas. And the O-line is also going to be very, very good. They return all AAC guard Xavier Hill, and they add Jalen Nichols, Trent Holler, and Keydrell Lewis, who all project to be starters from the portal. Jalen Nichols especially is interesting because he was slated to be South Carolina's starting left tackle last year before he went out with season-ending injury in the spring game last year. And all around, they're going to be a fairly deep unit once again this year, and they portal in a lot of depth to make that unit even stronger. And last on the offense, it's the running back room. Now, like we talked about before, Memphis isn't necessarily a run-heavy team, but it will be interesting to see if Silverfield and offensive coordinator Tim Cramsey implement the run more often, since they were pretty effective at it last season when they did. And they add South Carolina running back Mario Addison, who should immediately get most of the touches in that room. He's a great north-south running back, and he has high-end breakaway speed. Very, very effective running back. And he was fairly underutilized at South Carolina. He only had 140 carries last season. I believe Memphis's rush leader last season had about 170 to 180. And we would love to see him play a more integral role in the offense at Memphis. If he's used more often than he was at South Carolina, if Memphis decides to run it even 55% of the game instead of 45, he could be easily one of the best running backs in the Group of 5. That is how talented he is. He came in as an underdog at USC, wasn't rated very high in terms of stars, and he worked his way up the depth chart. And now he should be one of the better players on a very loaded Memphis team. And other than the offense, the linebacker room is also a big strength for Memphis this year. Chandler Martin, the Will linebacker, is pretty easily the best player on the defense. Last season, he had 66 solo tackles, 17 tackles for loss, 3 sacks, 2 interceptions, 2 forced fumbles, and a touchdown. Very key disruptor on that defense. Virtually every big play on the defense had him involved to some degree. And other than him, they add Arkansas State linebacker Javonte Mackey, who was very good as a redshirt freshman last year at Arkansas State. And they add all Ivy League second team linebacker Matt Hudson from Harvard. Going to be a very interesting unit. A lot of talent there, not necessarily in terms of star rating, but in terms of production from last year. And another strength for Memphis is going to be their specialists. They transfer in two very good specialists in former UTEP punter Josh Sloan and former Ole Miss place kicker Caden Costa. Now, Sloan was previously an all-AAC punter at UTEP. In 2023, he had 18 punts down inside the 20, which was 35% of his total punt. Very good numbers there. And Costa had a 100% extra point percentage, 80% field goal percentage in 2021 before he was suspended for the entire 2022 season. And then he didn't return until the last game of the regular season at Ole Miss, where he made his one and only field goal attempt in the Egg Bowl. And if those guys can get it going, Costa especially was good just a few short seasons ago. The specialists should be a very strong unit for Memphis this season. And their last strength is going to be their depth. Memphis hit the portal hard this offseason. They were first in the transfer team rankings amongst group of 5 teams, according to 24/7 Sports. They bring in 30, count them, 30 transfers, 10 of which are projected starters. 12 of the final 20 are going to be essential rotational pieces, and then 8 of those are potential pieces and just more added depth. Very, very strong. They bolster that depth chart so much. It is absolutely ridiculous. Going to be a loaded roster again this year. And those were their strengths. What about weaknesses? Now, we want to start off this segment saying just because something is a weakness, we don't think it'll necessarily be bad. The things we point out here are just going to be areas of the team which we think are weaker than some of the strengths like we talked about. And to start off, we're going to talk about the defensive line. The returning production on that line is a bit underwhelming. They do portal in depth, and they add potential starters in Indiana's Patrick Lucas and Jacksonville State's Devin Baldwin, both of which are pretty solid talent pieces, but didn't produce to a high level last year. And this is a bit of a concern just because Memphis was not effective at pass rushing last year or run defense last year. So ideally, you would want to get a proven commodity there to make that line a bit scarier. They don't really do that, but they didn't ignore it either. Should be pretty interesting to see how that line shakes out, but the added depth will probably play to their benefit this year. And other than the defensive line, the secondary is also a bit underwhelming. It's essentially the same story as the defensive line. I see what Silverfield and Jordan Hankins are doing just by adding that depth. I believe the goal for the defense is to fill it with quality depth to make up for the lack of star talent. They have a guy like Chandler Martin who should be a big key player on that defense, but other than that, they don't really have many stars. So the secondary is going to be filled with a lot of those rotational guys, not necessarily great players, but a lot of players. And that should work to some degree. It probably won't make the line or secondary elite units next year, but hopefully should help them improve. And that was the 2024 overview. Let's get right into some predictions. But first, let's talk about some keys to success for Memphis this upcoming season. Their first key to success is going to be sticking with what works. Memphis was one of the best teams in the group of 5 offensively last season. With Hennigan returning, it's going to be the same story. He's going to have arguably even better skill position talent at his disposal. There's really nothing you need to change offensively. Would like to see the running backs get a few more carries this year, but if they didn't, it probably wouldn't be to their detriment. And for the second key to success, it's going to be improving defensively. Now, you might be thinking, hey, Colton, no sugar, honey, iced tea. They need to improve on defense, but hear me out. When I say that, I don't mean magically turn a bad defense into a good defense. They have the depth now to have a very good rotation at all 3 levels. And last year, they weren't really able to say that. And like we said, Matt Barnes is out. His style obviously didn't work. Now Hankins will have a blank slate to work with. He's got a lot of players transferring in. He's got an empty canvas, and we'll get to see how he paints out his mural. And even if it's only a slight improvement, it could turn Memphis from a pretty good AAC team to an AAC champion and playoff appearing team. And for our third key to success, it's going to be utilizing Addison now. If you're not rushing him 20 times a game, at least get him the ball in some other ways. Like we said earlier, he was very effective at South Carolina last year, And it feels like had he been at an Alabama, Ohio State, or LSU, teams that utilize their running backs a bit better, he would have been a draft pick last year. But if you're Memphis, you now have a bell cow on top of one of the best offenses in the group of 5, and there's a lot of potential there. And with that being said, let's jump right into the final grades. The offense is going to shake out to an 85.0. For the hype we've given them, you might be thinking this is a little bit low, but adjusted to the group of 5 level, this is going to be the best offense. And the defense is going to come out to an 81.5. Adversely, this may seem a little bit high for what we've talked about this episode, but we believe this defense will be a lot better, not just because of what they added, but because Jordan Hankins looks like a pretty great replacement at defensive coordinator, should be able to at least somewhat improve that unit. As for special teams, they're going to come out to an 87.0. They have pretty good specialists like we talked about. Probably not one of the better specialist groups in the group of 5, but pretty good. And coaching is going to come out to an 85.0. Ryan Silverfield has spent the last 4 years at Memphis. In those 4 years, he's gone 31-18. It took a few years, but it looks like Silverfield and company have the Tigers back to where Mike Norvell had them previously before he left for Florida State. Very good coaching staff. Gets even better now that their weakest link is out and they add what should be an upgrade in Hankins. And as for strength of schedule, it's going to come out to an 84.0. Obviously not the worst schedule out there. No group of 5 team will have the worst schedule out there. But like we said earlier, it is pretty tough for the average American Conference schedule. And Florida State is a big non-conference opponent. With all that being said, the overall is going to be 84.5. Very sound team. One of our favorite teams out of the group of 5 this year. The 4 we listed on our poll for this video are our favorites this year. But if you saw our top 25 ranking just a few short weeks ago, you would notice that we did have Memphis listed in the top 25. And that's because we personally believe that Memphis is the best group of 5 team this year. And those were the grades. Let's get into the final predictions. The ceiling for Memphis is going to be 11-1 with an 8-0 conference record. This, of course, means Memphis goes undefeated in their conference and their only loss comes against Florida State. This is very possible. The American Conference isn't the hardest conference in the country, and they're going to be one of, if not the most talented team in it. And the floor for Memphis is going to be 9-3 with a 7-2 conference record. In this scenario, we have Memphis losing to Florida State, obviously, and then conference opponents UTSA and Tulane. Those are going to be their 2 toughest opponents. Also very possible both of those teams should be good again this year. But we think Memphis is in a better spot than both of those teams this season, which brings us to our final prediction. It is, in fact, 11-1 with an 8-0 conference record. For the first time in our season previews, we have a team hitting their ceiling in our prediction. We think Memphis will be great on offense and improve just enough on defense, which we think will propel them as the group of 5 representative in the college football playoff. We think Memphis is the best group of 5 team this season. And that is going to wrap up our season preview. If you enjoyed it, be sure to hit like and subscribe. Share with your dog, your cat, your mom, your grandpa, everyone you can think of. We appreciate all of the support. Let's get to 100 subscribers. If you want to vote on the next team, go to the community tab and vote. The next poll should be up when you are watching this video. There's going to be 2 more teams, and then we're going to jump into our conference predictions. So stick around for that. And as always, thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.